All righty. So, welcome to the Just for the Health of It podcast, interviews with our local health experts in Warren County Public Health. I'm your host, Drew Crawford. I'm a public health educator with Warren County Public Health. And today we're excited to talk with Dr. Meilhede with Glens Falls Pediatrics, or pediatric here. And we're going to talk about a little bit of childhood obesity. But before we begin with that, Dr. Meilhede, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, any fun facts about yourself or anything, how you got into the role and why you chose it.
Yeah, so it's actually Meilhede, and I'm a pediatrician at Adirondack Pediatrics, like you said. I'm originally from East Greenbush, so I grew up in the area relatively. I went to Siena for college, and after graduating, went to SUNY Upstate for medical school, and then got out of New York for a little bit and went to Portland, Maine for residency. Kind of thought we'd stay there, but with having family back here and loving the Lake George area, we decided to come back. And so right from residency, I joined Adirondack Pediatrics and have been there ever since. And it's great, love it. And I've always wanted to be a doctor, and I've always loved kids. So pediatrics was just the perfect combo of that. I guess something interesting that people find interesting is that I played water polo while I was at Siena, which is a pretty unfamiliar, unknown sport, but we were terrible. It was just starting up and we lost probably every match, but it was fun. It was a lot of exercise and kept me active, and that was a good experience.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. I mean, obviously, I don't mean to brag, but I was pretty good in gym class at water polo. I can't say, as long as we were in the shallow end, I was pretty good. Once I had to start treading water, I wasn't too good after that, but
well, you're lucky that your school had a pool in it, because where I grew up, we didn't have a pool at our school, so that's awesome. That's
fantastic.
Those opportunities, yeah.
So talking about childhood obesity, that is always a difficult conversation, and it's always a difficult topic to address, whether you're addressing it globally, nationally, locally. It's always really difficult to talk about it, but unfortunately, with the data that we get from our community health assessment from the New York State, we're seeing it really affect Warren County in ways that we haven't really seen before. You know, over 34% of the students in the county are overweight or obese. And, you know, that's more than 1 in 3. So that's definitely a larger number than we're typically used to. But, you know, from what we're seeing, we can only get the data. So from your point of view, being out in the community, seeing all these children and talking to these parents, does the data that we have kind of back up what you guys are seeing?
Yeah. So, you know, in terms of like definitions, we go by CDC definitions and data, and we use BMI to assess obesity or overweight. And it's not a perfect system, but it's kind of the best that we have. And so the BMI takes into account height or weight for height. And we also compare it to the norms for that age and that gender. And so, you know, CDC defines at risk for overweight as 85th percentile and above. And overweight is at or above the 95th percentile. So when you compare to peers in the age and gender. So yeah, we're, you know, nationally, you know, the rates are, like you said, it's, you know, becoming more prevalent for sure. For obesity or 95th percentile or above, is about 25% of children in our country. And so it's about 12% among the 2 to 5 year olds, about 20% among 6 to 11 year olds, and then 22% among 12 to 19 year olds. So as the age is older, we see more obesity. There's just been more opportunity to develop habits that create that. And then in our practice, we ran some numbers, and that's pretty well mirrored in our practice as well. So that's just, you know, a subset of our community. But we're seeing at, you know, just like the national levels, ages 2 to 5, about 12% or above the 95th percentile. Ages 6 to 12, 26%. 13 to 18 are teenagers, about 22%. So pretty closely mirrors that. And then if you look, you know, a little bit more broadly and look at the at risk for overweight, that is quite a lot more. And I think that's what you were saying, 1 in 3 or 35%. So if you look at the 85th percent and above, so the at risk for overweight, we're looking at numbers between like 28% to 40%, just in our practice, especially those middle grades, the ages 6 to 12. So yeah, it's common. It's a little bit tricky to address because there's so many, it's so multifaceted in terms of why and how to treat. And it's also a difficult topic to bring up because we want to be body positive and we want to, support all different types, but there are health consequences, and that's what we want to address, the health consequences.
Mm-hmm. Now, if we can just backtrack a little bit here, you and I know what the 85th and the 95th percentile really means, but to somebody else that may be watching this or listening to this, what does that kind of mean? Like, what is 85th percentile, the 90th percentile, things like that?
Yeah, so in terms of like the actual weight, it's a little bit hard to pinpoint, and that's why in my practice, and I know a lot of the other pediatricians and doctors in the area will bring up the charts and show parents how weight and length have changed over time. So because it is compared and it varies, BMI norms vary by age. Those preschoolers tend to be, kind of on the slimmer side. They're busy. Their body type is just naturally slimmer. And then as you get older and start getting closer to puberty, and certainly at puberty, you're supposed to have more weight. You get muscle and you get subcutaneous fat, and that's normal. So some of that is totally fine and healthy. But when we get above, 85th percentile, 95th percentile, we start worrying about the health consequences of having that additional weight.
Mm-hmm. Now, you were talking about it's multifaceted. There's so many factors that are at play. What kind of factors do you see that are at play? What kind of factors are going into childhood obesity?
You mean in terms of consequences or in terms of how we get here, or?
Well, we'll start with how we get here, and then we'll go into the consequences of that.
Yeah. So, right. So there's many reasons and factors. It's not, if there was an easy solution, we would be touting that and that would be it. But unfortunately, it's not that simple. So diet's probably the biggest factor in terms of contributing to weight. So regular eating higher calorie, dense foods, fast foods, baked goods, vending machine snacks. Those are all highly processed and high calorie foods. So it's easy to add extra calories. Candy and desserts, and then sugary drinks. I think sometimes we forget that those really do add up. So if you're sipping on juice all day long, or sports drinks, which, are quote unquote healthy, or at least they're promoted that way, then, you're really adding into your calories and then also into your insulin release. So there's a hormonal component to that. So the more sugar you put into your body, the more insulin's released and the more that sugar is locked away as for another day. So lack of exercise. So children who don't exercise as much are more likely to gain weight. So our lives have become a lot more sedentary over time. So, back, when I was a kid, we didn't have iPhones and tablets and screens. And I think we were just getting, I'm going to date myself, but we were just getting dial-up internet, so we didn't have, it wasn't fast. It got boring real quick if you're sitting there waiting for your dial-up. So you just spent more time outside. You spent more time doing activities. Screens and all these new technologies have helped in a lot of ways, but they've really, really harmed kids in their outdoor time. So that has really contributed, especially in the last few years. Family factors. Kids don't, come up with habits on their own. Kids model their parents. They model the adults in their life. So if you're in a family who doesn't value, activity, or is stressed, or maybe doesn't have the means to take you outside or get you into clubs or sports, or has limited resources for fresh produce, healthier foods, then you're going to model that behavior. And those are going to be your comfort foods. Those are going to be your family foods and your family activities or things that you do for fun. Stress can really affect how we cope and how we eat. So being very stressed. There's socioeconomic factors. So I mentioned a little bit just now, like availability of these things, so availability of resources. So if you live in a place where there's not a lot of grocery stores, farmers markets, we call these food deserts, and it has to do with accessibility. So, or if you can't get there, I mean, if you have to take a taxi to get to the grocery store, you're not going to go every day. You're not going to go every other day. You're going to do one trip. And you might stock up on shelf-stable foods, so highly processed foods that can be either frozen or stored in a cabinet, and those are not necessarily going to be the best foods. They're going to have a lot of salt, a lot of calories in them. So socioeconomic factors, play a part. Food insecurity is a big thing for kids. So if you don't know where your next meal is coming from, you're going to load up at that meal. So if your, mom and dad just brought home like a new set of groceries and, at the end of the week, you don't have enough, you're going to just kind of load up when you can. So kids that have food insecurity tend to overeat when they have the ability to. And then, there's certain medications that can cause weight gain too. This is a whole nother topic, but there's a mental health crisis among our kids. And so there's medications that sometimes we need to use. And sometimes those medications can cause increased appetite and weight gain. So that's an unfortunate side effect of some medications, not all of them though.
Yeah. From our standpoint in public health, we, one of the number one things that we always learn about is the social determinants of health.
Yeah.
You only get to your current health situation based on like the experiences that you have, like you touched upon the psychological factors. I'm stressed out all the time. I find comfort in eating. I'm a stress eater. I will 100% admit to it any day. I 100% am, but it's always having that, check in the back of your mind of like, okay, I'm stressed out. Why don't I, go for a run instead? Or why don't I talk to a friend or, do something that's a little bit more active and a little bit more productive. But, navigating that kind of conversation, especially, if you are a parent, navigating that conversation, being a parent's hard enough as it is, having somebody telling you that you need to be doing better is not always, it's a difficult conversation to have. So from your standpoint, I can imagine you have those conversations quite more often than we would like you to have those conversations.
Yeah.
And so how do you go through that? How do you navigate that kind of conversation?
Yeah, it's tricky. Like I said, I think, the BMI measurement, like I said, is not perfect. We have, athletes that have a lot of muscle that, would qualify as at risk for overweight or overweight, and then they're very healthy. So, I think that can be a little bit tricky. That's not the majority though. So I think, BMI is still a good tool for us to use, but it can be a little bit tricky. We always want to be body positive and we want to, promote that. But it's about health and about your organs. And so I typically will show the charts, show the changes, either, positive or negative in terms of where have we gone. And it helps when there's continuity of care. So meaning that, if you've been at our practice, since you were little, we have all that data. If you transfer in, we try to get as much of that data as possible because we like to look at trends over time. And so we'll look back and say, hey, what happened this past year? Like any changes, any like new stressful events, did your parents separate? Do you have a new baby in the house? Like what's going on? Because like you said, stress and different things can affect that. It can affect your health and your habits. I know, lack of sleep can really increase your appetite too. There's been multiple studies that have shown that if you're not getting the proper amount of sleep, you're tired during the day, you try to overcome that fatigue with, maybe food to give yourself some energy. So, and these are all very mature things that we can maybe like think about, like, oh, am I eating because I'm stressed or because I'm tired? But even for adults, that's hard. So for a 6-year-old to be like, maybe I'm eating these snacks because I'm tired. I mean, that's just not going to happen. That would be a very incredibly bright 6-year-old.
Yeah.
Self-aware. So yeah, it can be challenging. We have a lot of posters at our office. We follow the 5210 program. So this was actually a program that was started where I did my residency in Portland, Maine. And the website's letsgo.org. And so it tries to keep it simple, and it keeps it all about habits. So we're not talking about, first of all, we never want to tell a kid to lose weight. That's not okay.
Absolutely.
Because one, it promotes diet culture. And we know that diets don't work. Most diets fail and people end up gaining more weight. So it's not about diets. It's about healthy habits. And we can all use healthy habits, whether you're at the 50th percentile for your BMI or 95th, we all need healthy habits. So the 5210, let me just get it here. So it's 5 fruits and veggies a day, less than 2 hours of recreational screen time. And all through the pandemic, every kid I talked to about this said, oh, I'm on my screen all day for school. It's not what I'm talking about. I know you have to be on your screen for school. So this is recreational screen time. The 1 is for 1 hour of activity a day, and the 0 is for no sugar sweetened drinks. So it's 5210. We have handouts, posters, bracelets. So we try to promote these habits as a way of improving and promoting health. So the five fruits and veggies a day. So this is all about, healthy eating starts at home. And I make the point, especially with the older kids, that we can't control what they eat out of the house. I know my kids have a lunch account at school. They can get a bag of chips or an ice cream if they want. I have very little control over that.
Yep.
They have their own money now. They go to birthday parties or different things. And so I can't always control what they're having outside of the house, but I can control what's inside the house. I can control what we could buy at the grocery store. And there's actually been studies that show that if you put out fruits and veggies in your house, you cut it up, have it at eye level and prepared, that kids are more likely to grab it and eat it. And it was actually funny, in kind of preparing for this discussion, we had a cantaloupe lying around, cut it up, put it out. It was gone in like 2 hours.
Oh, absolutely.
So everyone just, every time they walk by, just kind of grabbed a handful of cantaloupe. So, but none of my, nobody was going to take the initiative to cut that up. I mean, that's a lot of work. So you do have to put some work into it, but you can do it. There are some convenience foods, at the store that help with that. Again, that comes with a cost. But having them readily available, and it's also what we call crowding out. So if we fill up our bellies with fruits and veggies, we don't have room for the snacks. We're not craving the highly processed snacks as much.
Absolutely.
I was gonna say, so do you want me to, I'll just go through the other, I was gonna flesh out the other 5210 a little bit.
Absolutely.
So with the recreational screen time, that's a little bit, like I said, that's a little bit more challenging. There are limits that you can set, and they're often built into many programs. So I know with the Apple products, you can do the family share and the screen time limits, and that can really help limit your kids without you having to be the nag and the person that has to constantly monitor that. So using those systems to limit your kids' screen time can really help. And when they're not on screens, like I said, they're more likely to use their free time playing, being active, shooting hoops, playing with the dog. And it also helps. So putting away the screens 2 hours before bedtime can help with sleep hygiene and sleep cycle. So we promote that as well, because we want kids to get a good night's sleep so that they're not stressed out. Their cortisol levels are not running high. So the 1 is for activity, 1 hour a day, which that sounds like a lot and can be a little overwhelming, but that includes everything. I mean, that can include riding your bike to school. It can include gym class. It can include an after school activity, family walk. So it doesn't have to be one continuous hour. And then the sugar sweetened drink. This can be a little bit challenging because sugar sweetened drinks are everywhere. And a lot of times they're advertised as being healthy. So you'll have kids that say, no, I don't drink, sugar sweetened drink, but I drink Gatorade all day. well, Gatorade actually has a lot of sugar. Or, I've had families that say, well, we don't drink soda, but we drink Sprite. Well, Sprite's actually soda, even though it's not brown. And it does have a lot of sugar in it. So, but yeah, I mean, it's hard to navigate because the juices will say all natural or, no high fructose corn syrup so they'll use kind of like those labels to indicate that they're healthy, but they still have quite a bit of sugar in an easily processed form. So encourage just plain water. If kids, sometimes they have a trouble getting used to it. So recommend, maybe some frozen berries, some lemon slices, if they're really having trouble, sometimes those sugar-free flavoring things can be helpful to kind of bridge that gap to get from drinking the sugary stuff to the water. But the ultimate goal is to be drinking plain water throughout the day.
Yeah. And, while we're on the topic of the sugary beverages, one that I've personally had a lot of experience with coming from college and, being an athlete and all those things is the energy drinks, the Red Bulls, the Monsters, the Celsius now, which is a really big one. All these different energy drinks, from my personal experience, a lot of athletes are using them because it, keeps the energy up high. You're burning a lot of fat when you're going through it because you have a lot of energy and the caffeine going through. It's a stimulant, so you're not eating as much, and then you can still fuel yourself for the day. And it can definitely lead you down a slippery path. We've read on studies that these energy drinks can put you at risk for cardiovascular disease if you take it far enough. And what would you say? Obviously the ultimate end goal is water, but that's not always the case for some people. Some people still really like it. They still really like the sugar and stuff like that. But what do you recommend that people do that for something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can use the artificial sweeteners, although that's, like you mentioned, the ultimate goal is water. There's some side effects with some of the artificial sweeteners. Sometimes they give people headaches. And I think any kind of artificial sweetener still stimulates your insulin secretion. So you're still telling your body, hey, sugar's coming, and your pancreas, releases insulin, and then you're hungrier. So it's still not great, but sometimes when kids are really struggling to get from, the juice and soda all day to the water, we'll use that to bridge. I mean, I think the energy drinks, there's still a lot out there we don't know about them. I mean, everything is, the poison's in the dose. So the more you drink of those energy drinks, the more side effects or more trouble you might have. You might get jittery or have those cardiovascular side effects, certainly with, and every energy drink is a little different depending on their ingredients. But I know with, the Gatorade, they make the G2, which is a little bit less sugar, uses the artificial. But I think, I don't think it's, right, like you said, the goal is 0 sugar sweetened drinks, but I think it would be almost better to have like a small dose or a small serving of the Gatorade or the energy drink, if that's what's going to happen. And then do the water throughout the day. So, and pairing those drinks with mealtime, because, there's been studies that show that, constantly giving your body sugar throughout the day is probably worse than sitting down for like 3 stable meals. And having that time in between with not constantly berating your body with sugar. So yeah, I would say limit serving size, reduce serving size, maybe find alternatives that are similar but maybe slightly healthier. Seltzers can be really like the flavored seltzers are usually 0 sugar. You have to look though, some of them do have some sugar. Or watering down drinks. I mean, I know a lot of families with young kids, they can water down the apple juice or water down those drinks. And, the kids aren't even aware, they're not even paying attention. So watering it down until you get to the point where just start giving them water and start at an early age.
So we talked about how childhood obesity is a multifaceted problem. There's a lot of things that go into it, a lot of factors that play. And what do you see are kind of the biggest barriers from getting a multifaceted approach into there and, trying to combat that? What are some of the barriers that you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think well, the biggest thing I think is just the constant snacking. So everywhere we go, there's snacks available. You know, it's back when we were, cave people, we didn't have food all the time. It took a lot of work to get the food that we ate. And now, advertising and food companies have really got it into our head that we need snacks all the time. And so we'll see that in our office. I mean, kids are, eating goldfish crackers and gummies like in the office, and it's you can go a little while without snacks. You don't need to have snacks constantly, and snacks are fun. I mean, of course, kids are going to want their treats and stuff. So that can be really hard. But so setting from the beginning, meal times and limiting the snacks in between meals. But I think also as a society, I mean, we have a lot of snacks. Like every time we have, a birthday party or an event in the community, a lot of times, and I've seen a little bit less of this, but I remember when my kids were smaller, seeing a lot of, snacks involved in, like there'd be a recreational sports program and there would be a parent sign up for snack time. And I remember feeling a little uncomfortable, but having to kind of reach out to the group and be like, guys, do we really need a snack for an hour of rec soccer? Like, we're going home to dinner right after. I don't want my kids having granola bars and gummy bears right before we go home for dinner. So
Absolutely.
I had to be kind of that mean parent and say, like, maybe just on the weekend, or so so I think that we don't need to have the constant snacks, and food is a reward. I mean, I think that can be a little bit challenging because sometimes kids have to do some things, painful procedures or shots, and so rewarding with food, it's not always the best way. We don't want to teach that. So finding a non-food reward for having to go through, maybe some shots or something is a good idea. So we'll have some parents that will let their kid pick out a prize at the dollar store, and of course we have stickers, but sometimes you need a little more than a sticker. So, and I mentioned before, food insecurity. That's a huge issue. That's a bigger issue that a parent can figure out. But sometimes we just need to point parents in the right direction. Sometimes they're eligible for WIC or for food assistance. I know some of the schools are doing like snack pack programs, and anyone can sign up for those. A lot of times there's not any kind of eligibility. You just say, I need extra food, and they have it. So I think we really kind of probably hit the horse with the technology and the screen time. So and then another thing is access to recreational activities. I think some competitive sports can be pretty competitive and selective. And that can be intimidating, especially if you haven't played since, if you didn't start playing that sport from the time you were born. Sometimes it can be hard. I found even as a elementary school age kid, it can be hard to get into that sport if you haven't been playing your whole life. Some of the teams are very selective, and some of them require a lot of transportation, time commitment, and money. So having more activity programs that are either free, have scholarships, or low cost. And if they're non-competitive, like not all kids, I always tell kids in the office, I ask them what they like to do. And, I have some kids that are like, I don't like sports. I don't like the competition. I said, that's fine. You still need to, try to find an activity that you like. So there are a lot of things in the community, fortunately. There's martial arts programs. There's a bike group called Saratoga Shredders, which is a non-competitive bike group. So, and then there's a lot of school programs. I know there was a running group at Queensbury. They met after school and did some running. I think they also have a mountain biking group. So those things are great for kids that maybe don't want to compete or don't feel comfortable competing, or don't have the time and the money and the commitment to do a travel team.
Absolutely. I love that you bring that up. For me personally, I've been playing soccer my whole life. But as you said, I was one of those kids that I just wanted to play for fun. I never really was super into the competition. Like, don't get me wrong, I will 100% compete. But as soon as I step off the field, it's out of
There's other
there. I'm done
things.
playing.
Yeah.
Yep. And, that's not always the case with certain teams.
Right.
My family, God bless my parents, they absolutely have 100% just they went above and beyond. And, like you said, it's a lot of time commitment. I spent a lot of my school breaks. I spent a lot of, weekends just traveling to different places and, playing games and being around the same people. And it can get really exhausting overall. And it can cost, like you said, quite a lot of money.
Well, there's some evidence too that playing the same sport year round can actually have some, negative effects on muscle health and fatigue and stress injuries. So you really should be changing up your activities. But now, I mean, with certain sports, you can play them year round, and it almost feels like you have to kind of keep up. So that's probably a whole nother topic. But yeah, just having, like I said, like activities that kids can do. And I know like Queensbury Parks and Rec, they have a lot of great programs, sometimes just for like the day, like a hiking event, or I know they co-sponsored this running group after school. So having those kinds of things where kids can just get together because it's always more fun with friends. So if you can get together with your friends and go for a hike after school, like that's so cool. But yeah, not everybody's into the competition or can do it. So having parks, I mean, our area is so fortunate. We have hiking trails and parks and lakes and community pools. So having those things available and making them, either inexpensive or free, and scattered throughout the community is going to be the best thing for everybody. So safe neighborhoods, safe places to walk and run.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, that's one of the great places about Warren County. Like you said, there's just so many options that you could do, whether you have, whether you want to do it in a school program, whether you want to do it at home, whether, you want to go outside of both school and home and do another club. There's so many options out here. We have our Adirondack Dome leagues. We've got, our hiking trails. We've got, right down the road over here, we got Rush Pond. And, all great trails. They've all been, made into ways to make it easily accessible for a lot of people. For parents, do you have any words, tips, or advice, when being able to sit down and being like, look, I know my child and I know my child's not healthy right now. I can see it. They're not moving around as much as they normally would. They're not as happy as they normally would. We saw with childhood obesity, there's physical effects, there's physical consequences, there's social consequences, and even economic consequences. And, for a parent, that can be really difficult to go through. So what kind of words or tips or advice would you have for a parent that could be going through that?
Yeah, that's really hard because when you have kids, you want them to thrive. I mean, that's the goal. And yeah, like you said, childhood obesity has health consequences, and we see higher rates of fatty liver disease, which is when your liver isn't properly functioning because it has extra fat in it. We can see, type 2 diabetes is really starting to increase quite a lot. So cardiovascular disease starts in childhood. I mean, for everybody, not even just overweight kids. That's when that's when you start developing plaques in your arteries. So high cholesterol, gallstones. And then orthopedic problems too. I mean, carrying extra weight affects your joints. And you mentioned like socio-emotional issues. I think the world is a little bit better about, not bullying and being body positive, but I mean, kids still get picked on, and it's harder for them. And then, a lot of times when we're stressed or feeling sad, we turn to food for comfort. And I use us in general, because I think everyone does that to some extent. So the more, and then that makes it harder to treat the obesity. So we don't want to be negative. We certainly never want to shame a child. We don't want to tell one child they cannot have this dessert or this food or whatever, but everyone else can. So it has to come, because that just triggers shame. And shame is just, like I said, it's just going to make the problem worse, because we're just going to retreat into ourselves, not get out there and be active, feel kind of hopeless. And so that's no good for anybody. So it needs to be a family event. So we just talk about the health of the family. Kids can't make those big decisions about what to buy at the grocery store or what to pick from the pantry. I mean, us as adults, I have hard enough time, if there's ice cream in the house, like, yeah, I'm going to want some. So, so those are not things that kids, and sometimes, we'll see parents say like, see, I told you can't eat that. I'm like, no, we have to do it from a family perspective. So, so just encouraging like healthy habits for the family in general. Like, okay, we're going to make sure we get our 5 fruits and veggies. We're going to get outside for a walk after dinner. Make it a family event. Everyone will benefit from it. When kids do have, if they're overweight, a lot of times we will check lab work because we want to screen for those things. We want to screen for metabolic issues, type 2 diabetes, risk factors. So we will get screening labs. And sometimes I think that does help to promote those healthy habits. Like I'll have a sheet specifically it's actually from Harvard School of Medicine that says like, okay, if your triglycerides are high, these are the steps you should take. So getting activity, reducing your trans fats. And so I'll just kind of circle all of those tips and send those to the family. And then we'll recheck them again, either in a few months or at the next year's physical, so that we can kind of keep on top of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Childhood obesity is definitely it's a topic that's a little uncomfortable to definitely navigate through. But having the resources that we do out here, it definitely makes it a little bit easier. And I absolutely love, like you said, it's not about telling them no, it's about bringing options like to the table, being like, okay, yes, like you could have the Chips Ahoy cookies right now, but maybe we should, do something else in the meantime. Maybe we should, go outside, or maybe we should go for a walk, and making a whole family thing. That's always super important, like you said, the child isn't going to be the one making the decisions,
right, or
being able to have the awareness to be like, okay, maybe I probably shouldn't be, drinking all this juice or, anything like that. So making a whole family thing is definitely huge.
And it's never about like denying completely any one type of food. I think sometimes even as adults we get into like, oh, carbs are bad, no, fat is bad, no, this is bad. There's no, there's very little that is like actually a bad food. So it's all on a scale, it's all on a spectrum. So there's foods that have more health, more nutrition than others. So we're aiming toward pushing our eating habits toward those foods and less of the other, the highly processed, high calorie foods. So it's never about no, it's just about, and sometimes parents will come up with really creative things like, hey, you know what, as a family, we're just going to do dessert on weekends. Okay. So during the week, if you want dessert, or, we'll do a piece of fruit during the week, but on the weekends we can go out or we can make it a treat. So, so making it, I think we've gotten away from treats being treats and they're just everyday occurrences. And certainly, COVID and the pandemic did not help any of this. We were all kind of sad and stuck inside and, nothing to do. And so, I mean, you saw everybody was baking and that was a fun activity, but then you have all this, stuff around. And so that really has affected our rates of childhood obesity. There's been studies that show that there have been increases. I have seen some correction of that since some of the activities in school has been back in session, but not all of it, I think. So, so getting back into those healthy habits that we had before.
So as we wrap up our topic of discussion here of childhood obesity, is there anything else that you really want to add that we didn't quite get to cover yet, or?
Let's see. I think we've gone through a lot of things. I think in general the topic can be overwhelming, even for myself as a pediatrician and a parent. I think sometimes it certainly can be overwhelming, and it's hard to combat the peer pressure too. They see fun snacks at school and they want those fun snacks, and sure, you want to be the cool mom and get your kid the cool snacks, and So, and that's fine. We can do some of that. So it's all about balance. Unfortunately, it's not like smoking where it's just like, okay, just quit. We need to eat. We need to
Yeah.
eat every day. And so every day we're presented with choices, and it can be overwhelming. But, I think the kind of sticking with just a few small changes at a time can be really, can be a lot easier. So taking the 5-2-1-0 and choosing one of those. And sometimes I'll ask a kid, an older kid that can kind of make some decisions. I'll say, well, which one of these things do you think you can really focus on? You think you can get 5 fruits and veggies? You think you can get 2 hours or less of screen time? Let's pick one and do that. And then when I see you back, we're going to pick the next one. And I've had kids that just cut out sugary drinks and either, their weight stayed the same and their height caught up. And so their BMI went down, or, they started limiting screen time. So I think, we have to just not be too overwhelmed so that we throw up our hands in the air and say it's hopeless. I think we need to take one step at a time, make one small change, and then build from there. Once we're successful with that change, add in another change. So it's not hopeless. There's lots of things we can do. This community has a lot of great farmers markets and hiking trails and different things we do. We just have to have it on our brain.
Yeah, absolutely. And, thank you so much for coming on here. I know it was a little weird, especially with it being our first podcast here, but, you've been fantastic to have on here. We've covered definitely a lot considering how big the topic is. But, really appreciate your insight, and especially as a health professional, you're one of the leading voices for health in our community. And, we thank you so much for your support, especially through all of, COVID that was happening and, being able to have these conversations. It's, we really appreciate you. We thank you for taking your time out of your day for coming here to talk to me about childhood obesity.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm your host, Drew Crawford, public health educator at Warren County Public Health. Thank you for listening. Be safe, be healthy, and we'll see you back next time.